Well, letter number 5 is Chad Daybell seizing the microphone. He promises a foundation of facts, blames the state for twisting his beliefs, and accuses his own attorney of missing cross-examination opportunities. And then he pivots to 4 claimed near-death experiences as the key to making 2019 finally make sense. So let's expose the psychological choreography going on. Externalizing blame, elevating theology to evidentiary status, laundering credibility with vivid sensory detail, and using serial teases to control the reveal. This isn't contrition. It's an engagement strategy and a public defense dressed in spiritual testimony. It's offensive to the victims and destabilizing to public record, and it's still a cliffhanger for the truth. Well, hey folks, here I am at my 5th favorite location at the ranch, and my voice is really giving me trouble today, so sorry if I sound a little different. Now, Chad Daybell started with a slow pull-in on the actor's curtain with his first line of the letter saying, quote, "I'm eager to explain the events of 2019 to you, but it's very important that I first build a solid foundation of facts. Once these facts and my religious beliefs are properly explained, if you believe all this, the events of 2019 will finally make sense." And with that shameful tease, I'm going to add my own pause and invite you to click and hit that like and subscribe button. Now, Chad Daybell's thesis, also known now as letter number 5, tells you everything that you need to know about rhetorical architecture. He's signaling method, authority, and the promise of a reveal. It's the classic build the scaffolding move before you show the house because you want us to admire the beams. It conveys orderliness and, more importantly, control. And he's controlling the timeline. He controls the evidence in these letters, and he controls the interpretive frame. Now, there are 2 red flags jumping out, and they really matter. First, the phrasing shifts blame to the audience for not understanding. It's our fault. It implies that we haven't been given the right facts yet. Not that Chad's culpable. And second, the way he couples facts with religious beliefs is entirely strategic. He's elevating belief to the status of evidentiary material. He's getting ready to translate theology into factual defense. That's page 1 in a rebranding manual in the cult world. Set the terms, control the reveal, and make your audience defer judgment. And next, Chad Daybell goes straight to the grievance. He says, quote, "It was the state who defined what my religious beliefs are," close quote. He continues to write on that during his court trial, he was bothered at how well-known beliefs, simple beliefs that he had, were twisted by the state into sinister, frightening ideas that the state repurposed, claiming these ideas were the catalyst for terrible crimes. And he's really strong here. He says, "I didn't commit those." Time after time, he said it was the state who defined what his religious beliefs were, not the witnesses on the stand. And that's his core complaint. He says the prosecution misdefined his beliefs and they weaponized them. So listen to the shape here. The actor, which would be the state, is acting, twisting, repurposing, and the result is they're making it all a criminal case. Well, no, that's called evidence. It's an externalization of responsibility and a reframing of a trial now as a media misinterpretation rather than a legal adjudication that was built on evidence. Well, make no bones about it. He was convicted in a court of law, The case was heard, evidence was presented, they had a chance to cross-examine, and a jury found him guilty of murder. And then the judge sentenced him and gave him the death sentence. You know, this is psychology at work. It's classic external attribution. When threatened, people attribute negative outcomes to outside forces. It's everyone else's fault. And in practical terms, it's a persecution narrative pitched to people who already distrust institutions. So if you're some of those, you might be leaning Chad's way. The letter invites readers to believe that the evidence that they watched was really just misunderstood theology. And I want to add a little analytic note here. He doesn't just deny, he accuses the state of deceit. And that's more aggressive than just I'm innocent. It's recasting him as a victim of institutional misreading. And frankly, I just don't buy it. But he keeps pushing the process. He says the witnesses would get into a rhythm of saying yes or correct. And he continues on by saying, and as I read through those trial transcripts, even more obvious on paper, the state repeatedly made inaccurate statements in the form of questions. And the witnesses, who were in a rhythm of saying yes or correct, would then say yes again without hesitation. Well, there are two rhetorical components here. Number one, this procedural critique and credibility attack. The claim is that the record is a scripted drumbeat, that the prosecutor suggests and the witnesses parrot. So the whole thing looks manufactured if you believe Chad Daybell. Now, is it plausible to find lots of yes and no's in any transcript? Absolutely. But notice how he frames it to the casual reader. He says the transcript looks rehearsed, which seeds doubt. And doubt is the most important commodity for somebody who's mounting a post-conviction narrative campaign. Psychological theory backs this up. Illusionary pattern detection and illusionary truth effect. It's the repetition creates perceived veracity. So by pointing out repetition, he simultaneously critiques it, and he primes you to notice it, which makes you more likely to question the process if, again, you're buying all of this. But then we get to the scapegoat. He says, quote, my lawyer failed to fill in those blanks on cross-examination, close quote. He continues by saying, and unfortunately, my lawyer failed to fill in those blanks. Straightforward, accuse the lawyer, accuse him publicly to explain the loss. But why would he do that? Because it externalizes the verdict to incompetence rather than the facts that the jury heard. It's an old defense play. The rules were fair, but I had the wrong players. Now, two audience effects matter here. Sympathetic readers who are reading these letters, people who distrust the system, are probably going to see, yeah, maybe poor counsel. They might feel injustice. But neutral readers, they're going to see another reframing attempt by Chad Daybell. But either way, the rhetorical economy is efficient. If the lawyer failed, then the record is unreliable. But now we're going to hit the pivot, those near-death experiences. He writes, I feel it's best to begin by sharing with you my near-death experiences, which have had very significant impacts on my life. Now, there have been 4 times in my life when I've actually died and my spirit has gone into another realm before returning back to my body. Now, this is the moment that he abandons the cross-examination gripes and he moves into cosmic testimony. The rhetorical move here is to install extra legal evidence, subjective spiritual experiences, these foundational facts that he wants to bring in. In his world, these near-death experiences are truth supplied to trump any secular testimony. And here's why this matters. Those near-death experiences are internally convincing and emotionally powerful. For a religious audience that's buying all this, claiming those near-death experiences is a massive credibility boost. It suggests special revelation, prophetic status, even predestination. But for the skeptical viewer, it reads more like an attempt to displace material evidence with metaphysical claims. So either way, he reframes the conversation from what happened to what I experienced. This psychological mapping is important because authority through extraordinary experiences, people when they claim unusual spiritual events can often gain leader-like stature in insular groups. For audiences that are predisposed to a faith-based deference, these are really persuasive kinds of things. So he brings up that Flaming Gorge account where he says, hey, my near-death experience was short, August of '85. We were leaping into the reservoir, and I pushed off with my right foot, and I began my descent. And he goes and talks about how he goes into the water, and he feels this physical striking of the water, and then he hears a pop. I mean, when you hear the letter, you're going to note the rhetorical turn. Immediately, his body experiences trauma. This metaphysical vision occurs, but then he returns to life. And the experience is going to end with him being changed. He says, I was spiritually changed. And that's the intended function, to say, this event proves that I've seen the other side, and therefore my interpretations have authority. Well, from a behavioral angle, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But in persuasive, vivid narrative, often the outcome is that people believe it. It's the same mechanism that makes conversion testimony persuasive. The more vivid the story, the more convincing it feels, irrespective of verification. So he doubles down on this story. He says, I saw pellets of light. He writes, there was a soothing, warm feeling. This was all spiritual candy for a sympathetic ear. It's seductive language that makes the internal experience feel beyond reproach. Well, who doesn't want to believe somebody encountered total peace? But from a manipulation standpoint, it's also a way to immunize a worldview. If your authority comes from this experience, you set yourself above the scrutiny that relies on material proof. That's why such narratives are common in these charismatic, cult-adjacent groups. These private revelations trump any public record. But then there's the hook. He said, I died 4 times. I died 4 times, and I came back. He said, now I'm going to describe the second incident in the next letter. We're on letter number 5, and he's already setting us up for 4 more letters. This is that serial technique I've talked about. The tease does 2 jobs. It promises further extraordinary material that's going to keep you returning to hear his stories. And it spaces out the revelations, allowing him to control the momentum. Serial confessions are a conversion engagement strategy. It keeps people on the line. And from a psychological standpoint, seriality creates a mediated relationship with followers. The more they invest in an unfolding story, the more primed they are to accept later narratives because they've already bought in to those previous installments. So, the idea is to just do this like a movie. Treat the line like a cliffhanger. Freeze frame, and then say, hey, this is the next thing coming. And you likely will come back to watch it.
Well, hey folks, it's Mike from Profiling Evil, and I got to tell you about one of my new weapons. It's called newspapers.com, and I am on there all the time, digging up old headlines, solving pieces of criminal puzzles, and even uncovering wild stuff from my own family tree. So if you love going down the rabbit hole as much as I do, whether it's chasing a cold case or uncovering grandma's mysterious past, this is a place to start. Now you can use our special link for a sweet discount, and yes, I do get a small commission, so you're helping grow the channel too. So just head to the link in the description below and start exploring.
And then he goes back to building the bookshelves. He talks about important people that have had near-death experiences. He talks about movies. He talks about actors. And this is rhetorical triangulation because he's taking a private experience and he's trying to frame it inside mainstream cultures. He's going to say, hey, look, everybody, the mainstream accepts this. Thereby, what I'm saying is normal. In essence, what Daybell's doing is building a chain: private revelation, cultural validation, public credibility. But the underlying strategy here, what these near-death experiences are doing for him, is it collapses into three moves. First, it provides him authority. These extraordinary spiritual experiences confer a kind of epistemic authority. He implies access to knowledge that you and I don't have. Second, it gives him moral immunity because by elevating his personal revelations, he's building a wall against the empirical evidence that's already out here. The truth he knows isn't measured by court procedures. And then third, the emotional reframing, the near-death experiences cast his life as part of a divinely sanctioned arc, one which makes subsequent crimes look misunderstood. You see, predestination, or his preferred framing, misinterprets secular authority. In short, these near-death experience contents are an effort to translate charisma into public defense. And by claiming these multiple near-death experiences, he's elevating himself, and this is just a sign of this narcissistic self-regard. There's self-justification through special pleading. If you've seen the other realm, ordinary moral categories would feel inadequate, according to Daybell. And he can rationalize choices that violate the law because of that. Daybell is revealing his playbook in a measured drip. He's building a relationship with us, the reader, as he rewards loyalty and curiosity. And by criticizing the state in the trial, he's distancing himself from culpability, and he aligns with being persecuted. And there's recruitment in cultural proof. By citing books, celebrities, and his near-death experiences, he's saying, look, I'm not a standalone. This has happened to other people. Well, Chad Daybell frames this thesis with a foundation, which kind of looks credible. He lodges procedural claims to seed doubt. He introduces these extraordinary near-death experiences as superior evidence, and he uses vivid sensory detail to launder credibility, all the while triangulating with public books and films, everything to normalize these revelations he's had. And he promises the narrative, this serial promise that there's more to keep you invested in it. And he releases the narrative in a serial manner, promising more in order to keep you invested.
Letter number 5. I'm eager to explain the events of 2019 to you, but it is very important that I first build a solid foundation of facts. Once these facts and my religious beliefs are properly explained, the events of 2019 will finally make sense. During my court trial, I was bothered at how simple, well-known beliefs were twisted by the state into sinister, frightening ideas that the state repurposed, claiming these ideas were the catalyst for terrible crimes I did not commit. Time after time, it was the state who defined what my religious beliefs are, not the witness on the stand. As I read through the trial transcript, it is even more obvious on paper. The state repeatedly made inaccurate statements in the form of questions, and the witnesses would get into a rhythm of saying yes or correct many times in a row, without hesitation. The result was a distortion of my beliefs, and I think an incomplete picture or half story of what the witnesses actually heard or saw. And unfortunately, my lawyer failed to fill in those blanks on cross-examination. So I feel it is best to begin by sharing with you my near-death experiences, which have had very significant impacts on my life. There have been 4 times in my life when I've actually died and my spirit has gone into another realm before returning to my body. The LDS Church teaches that a human being consists of 2 parts, a spirit body and a physical body. The spirit body resides inside the physical body and gives it life. When we die, the spirit and the body separate from each other. The spirit continues to live and goes into the spirit world while the body ceases to function. For example, picture your spirit as your hand and your body as a glove. The glove is just a covering, and it can't move without your hand inside it. A near-death experience, or NDE, is like when the hand is briefly removed from the glove and then put back inside. NDEs can be found in historical records dating back thousands of years among all races, nations, and religions. They have been part of LDS lore since the church was founded, and NDEs were regularly printed in the church's newspapers and magazines. Many NDEs indicate, as LDS doctrine confirms, that before we were born, we lived as part of a heavenly family. We were eager for the chance to come to earth and receive a physical body. We understood it would be a challenging experience, but that our time on earth would help us grow emotionally and spiritually. We all helped write our own life plan, your blueprint for what we would accomplish during our lives, who we would interact with, and when our life would end. Most NDEs occur when someone dies, but it isn't their time to go. They are sent back into their body to complete their life mission. My first near-death experience was rather short, but it's had a profound effect on me. It was August 1985, and I just turned 17. I was at Flaming Gorge Reservoir in northern Utah as part of a church youth group that included several of my friends. We had started the day by leaping into the reservoir from cliff ledges along the lakeshore that were about 20 feet high. That was fun, but then we noticed a 60-foot high cliff that jetted out over the water. It looked like a natural diving board. We saw someone jump off it, and soon we were scrambling up the hillside to reach it. Once we got up there and saw how high it truly was, we were intimidated, but we were also stupid teenagers. My friends convinced me I should jump first. I shook off my nervousness and gazed down at the water below me. Finally, I pushed off with my right foot and began my descent. I remember thinking, this is taking a really long time. When I eventually hit the water, it felt like I had slammed into concrete. A shock went through my entire body, and I saw a flash of white light. I felt an audible pop at the base of my skull, and I thought, oh no, I broke my neck. I also wondered if I'd cut open my forehead because there was a brief searing pain above my eyes. I quickly realized something even more alarming had happened. My spirit was partly out of my body. The best way to describe it is that my physical body went deeper into the water than my spirit did. This caused my spirit to pop out through my head, but with my spirit's knees stuck in my skull. In other words, for some reason, I didn't make it all the way out of my body. It was more like 3/4 out. During those few moments, I was in another dimension. I saw an endless white plain in all directions, and I heard a deep, rich melody that sounded like a synthesizer. As I pondered the music later, it was very similar to a song called 1984 that opens Van Halen's 1984 album. The song is an instrumental that is just over a minute long, and it definitely has the same uplifting, rich heavenly sound that I heard while out of my body. I noticed the pain was gone that I had initially experienced. There was a soothing warmth surrounding me, and I saw little pellets of light and energy rushing toward me from all directions. These pellets were absorbed by my spirit, and I felt wonderful, even euphoric, and at complete peace. However, my physical body soon started to float toward the surface. My spirit quickly reversed course through my head and was sucked back into place. I instantly felt chilled and somewhat paralyzed. I must have taken a while getting to the surface, because one of my friends who had been standing on the shore had jumped into the water to rescue me. He grabbed hold of me and towed me to the water's edge. All I said to him was, "Something snapped when I hit the surface. I'm done for the day." After I returned home from Flaming Gorge, my entire body was sore for a week. I felt off-kilter, like my body and spirit were disjointed. Sometimes my right eye would go blind, but if I hit the side of my head with my palm, I could see again. On the other hand, I was spiritually changed. I'd glimpsed another dimension, and it had felt like home. I still lived a normal life, graduating from Springville High and then completing my freshman year at BYU Provo. Then during my LDS mission, certain spiritual gifts increased. I was better able to receive promptings and impressions that helped keep me out of danger. As I mentioned earlier, I have died 4 times. I will describe the second incident in the next letter. It happened while I was on vacation with my family in San Diego, California. I was struck by a large wave at La Jolla Cove and was not completely knocked out of my body this time. I really needed to stay out of the water. Bookshelf in the 1970s, several scientists and researchers began to study modern-day reports of near-death experiences, or NDEs. Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, compiled several of these accounts and brought NDEs to the attention of the general public. At around the same time, Dr. George Ritchie wrote a fascinating first-person account of his death, his journey into another realm, and then his return to his body. The book is Return from Tomorrow and has sold millions of copies worldwide. These books and others like them have helped people believe in an afterlife where we will reunite with our deceased family members, friends, and even pets. I recently became aware of an NDE that happened to Jeremy Renner, the famous actor who plays the character Hawkeye in the Marvel Avengers movies. As you likely know, Renner was involved in a devastating accident on New Year's Day 2023 when he attempted to stop a snowplow from hitting his nephew. Renner suffered severe injuries, with more than 30 broken bones. His recovery took many months, including having to learn how to walk again. He has written a book titled My Next Breath about his ordeal. Renner also shared his story on an episode of Kelly Ripa's Let's Talk podcast. He explained to her that during his accident, he felt his spirit leave his body. He said, "It's a wonderful, wonderful relief to be removed from your body. It's the most exhilarating peace you could ever feel." He added, "It's the highest adrenaline rush, but the peace that comes with it, it's magnificent, it's so magical." Renner didn't really want to return to his body, and he was actually a bit angry about it. He saw his damaged legs and thought, yeah, that's gonna hurt later. Renner was only in the afterlife for a few minutes, but the experience was a great confirmation to him about what is really important in life. He says the experience taught him to repel the things he had given so much value to before, and that he now sees as having zero value. He said he now invests his energy into love and his relationships with others. These books I've mentioned, as well as movies such as Ghost and The Sixth Sense, have helped to make your near-death experiences and the reality of an afterlife an accepted part of American culture.
Well, in my opinion, genuine accountability would look a whole lot different. And I'm going to share what I think he's really thinking as he's writing these letters. And then I'm going to ask for your comments on this. Because if he were moving toward real contrition, I think we'd see confessions, not all of this stuff that's going on. Let's watch my reading of the letter. I half wonder if Chad Daybell believed letter number 5 was going to be his coup de grace. But he starts out by saying, "I'm eager to explain the events of 2019. Now, this is Chad's thesis statement. He's telling us, number 1, don't judge me on what you think you know, because I'm going to build my own foundation of facts and faith. And if you follow along and agree with me, everything's going to make sense." And this, my friends, is classic manipulation. He's reframing the year 2019, the year of multiple murders, as a misunderstood spiritual journey. He wants us to think, oh, if I just let him explain his visions, it'll all add up. And he's going to make sure that you walk away believing that the courtroom is the villain, because he's going to set up the state as the great distorter of facts. He's going to say they twisted his beliefs, they repurposed them into sinister motives. And the translation of all of that is that the prosecutors didn't convict him with evidence, they convicted him by slandering his faith. Well, the psychology here is the textbook persecution complex. He, the righteous man, is attacked for his religion. The problem? His faith wasn't on trial. It was the fact that there were bodies in graves in his backyard and that he killed his wife. But if he can convince you that it's all about faith, then suddenly he's not a killer, he's a martyr. And let's not miss how offensive this is to, again, actual members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, or I think, frankly, any faith tradition. Because there are millions of missionaries and believers who live the doctrine that they believe in with humility, sacrifice, and service. Chad Daybell hijacked sacred beliefs to paint himself as a victim of religious oppression. He took their consecration and he weaponized it for his own defense. And that's not testimony, folks, it's exploitation. But he doesn't stop there. He starts bringing out the big guns and he talks about his near death experiences. And here's where the scaffolding really starts to go up because he claims that not once, not twice, but 4 times he actually died, went to heaven, and came back. This, my friends, is his nuclear card. And if he can convince you that he literally crossed the veil and went to heaven and then came back, then who are you to question his visions? He describes that first near death experience in dramatic, almost cinematic detail. Going to Flaming Gorge, the 60-foot cliff, the white light, the pellets of energy, Van Halen's synthesizer. He mixes adolescent daredevil antics with mystical revelation. And the psychological trick here is make it so vivid that you forget that you're supposed to be evaluating what he says critically. And notice the shift. The physical pain disappears, the euphoria takes over, and suddenly he has new gifts. Gifts that help him avoid danger on his life mission. Well, that's not canonizing, folks. He's setting himself up as a chosen person, marked by God through these near death experiences, which I guess supports his belief that God wants him in prison, because apparently the God he believes in didn't protect him and keep him out of prison. But let's not forget that bookshelf section where he's borrowing authority. He starts name dropping all kinds of actors, movies, etc. This is rhetoric and camouflage. He wraps his personal 4 deaths in the credibility of science, pop culture, and celebrities. The message is look here, folks, I'm not crazy. Other smart, famous people believe this stuff too. And then, of course, there's the musical section again of the eternal family. He pivots into doctrine about his God, about others, and hymns. This is a clever emotional tether. He ties his mystical experiences to beloved sacred hymns, to doctrine. And he reminds us that criticizing him would be like criticizing the faith itself. And again, this is offensive to believers. He's exploiting some of the most sacred teachings in the Latter day Saint faith and many other Christian, Muslim, Judaism, Buddhism faiths. The thought of family, eternity, divine parentage, but he turns them into a courtroom alibi. And for people who live these beliefs with honor, this kind of manipulation is stomach wrenching. So here's the bottom line, the real playbook decoded here. Number one, it's reframed the year 2019, not as a crime spree, but as a misunderstood prophecy. Number two is to blame the state. It's not evidence, it's twisted faith. To elevate, number three, elevate himself through these near death experiences, saying, hey, I'm not guilty, I'm chosen. And number four, to borrow credibility. Because scientists, celebrities, and the movies are saying the same thing about those near death experiences. And number five, sanctify the narrative by wrapping it all up in hymns and heavenly doctrine. You know, Chad ends by teasing us, saying, I've died 4 times. I'll tell you about the next one in the next letter. And keep in mind again, folks, this is a hook. He's writing like a serialized prophet memoir. drip feeding revelations to keep us coming back. So here's what I think we can expect in the coming letters. I think we're going to see more near death experience information, each bigger than the previous one, until his claims of prophecy look inevitable. I think he's going to attempt to link his visions directly to 2019. So he can say, hey, look, see, this wasn't crime, it was a divine plan. He's going to exploit more church doctrine, and he's going to recast himself as a martyr, not as a murderer. And almost certainly, he's going to reveal some new hidden truths that only Chad Daybell has the authority to reveal. So here's the teaser for all of you. Keep watching, because this is how Chad Daybell's laying the groundwork in letter number 5. Self-canonization through near-death visions. Then the letter reveals almost certainly that things are going to escalate. He's building toward a full-blown prophetic narrative, and we're going to decode every manipulative turn. So stick around, folks, because I think there's more to come. Well, there you go, folks. Letter 5 doesn't offer more. It offers scaffolding. It offers more serial events to this thing that he's doing. And he's talking about at least 4 more letters if he's covering each of those 4 near-death experiences. All of this is dangerous for followers. 2 harms stand out in my opinion. First, the near-death experience narratives can radicalize believers and their devotion. If a believer is buying Chad Daybell's spiritual mandate, they could discount the legal and moral evidence in favor of this metaphysical testimony that he's spewing. And that's especially perilous when followers are asked to defend or to fund his appeals. And second, he's trying to change public memory. When these narratives substitute for material evidence, the record becomes muddled. And that's not fair to the families. Now, people who didn't sit through the trial could be seduced by Chad Daybell's charisma and vivid testimony, perhaps. I don't personally think he's that charismatic. But we could end up with competing public narratives about what happened in that case. These letters' rhetorical charm has been weaponized. And letter number 5 is a textbook in rhetorical hijacking, procedural complaints, mystical testimony, personal revelation. Read it for its craft, folks, because the craft is pretty effective. But don't let the craft substitute the facts. And if this analysis helped you, I'd like to ask you to hit the like and subscribe button. Ring the bell so you don't miss a single episode. And drop your comments down below. But keep it kind. Enter your comments and share what you have to say with others. Weigh in on their style. You can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like your true crime on the go, check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. You know, there's a reason why we were nominated for the 2025 People's Choice Award at CrimeCon. We're really grateful for those of you who voiced your opinion. Check out profilingevil.com's website and sign up for our digital newsletter, The Bolo. And while you're there, check out some of my books. You might be interested in my book about my grandmother's murder in 1891 and how I solved it 130 years later. It's called She Knew No Fear. Hey, thanks for your support, folks. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.